Today on our podcast, we have Aveena Mothilall, CIO of Engen. So thank you so much for joining us today, Aveena. It's really awesome having you on the podcast. We've been looking forward to this episode. And maybe we can just start off with you giving let's call it the elevator pitch of who Aveena is.
Thanks, Louise. It's really a pleasure to be here and to join you this morning. And so if I had to do the elevator speech around who Aveena is, I would say passionate strategist that loves working with technology to make a difference into organizations and working with teams to collaborate for making a difference for the organization. So I love working with people, and I truly believe on the value of technology and data to exponentially grow organizations into the future. And I think that's who I am.
That's awesome. Thanks for that. And I definitely do think that you are wearing the right hat to do all those things in terms of your role. Definitely lots of opportunity there. I think we've got a few topics on the table today for discussion. Maybe if we can start in a more general, broader way with just the topic of digital transformation. It's been a buzz for so long. Many people have many versions and many wordings for it. But maybe let's talk about how to navigate this ever changing environment and what the key things are that we see happening.
No, sure, Louise. And having plus 20 years career in corporates, in IT, and in business roles, I think digital transformation for me, there's a couple of elements to it. It's one, the technology landscape has been changing, giving my age away, but it wasn't just about the introduction of the internet to going from 3.1H to 4.6 to 6 and now to S4HANA, but also in terms of social media, Facebook, WhatsApp, and now the whole chat GPT. So with all these technology changes out there and its effect to the organization, I think in the old days, the focus would have been more about productivity. How are we using this technology to do business the same way we're doing business? So it was still business as usual, but using these tools in it. Whereas digital transformation for me is about new. It's about
Yeah.
really truly transforming organizations to be able to define themselves differently, to even reimagine new ways of doing business, new business, and going out there. And that's truly an opportunity that does exist. So I think for me, digital transformation is not just about using technology for doing better, but truly changing oneself for a new future.
And I think you are spot on there. I think the key is in the transformation of it, because you made me think of
Mhm.
something else now as you were talking, is that this whole thing where people have become digital savvy, even the
Mhm.
non-digital natives have become digital savvy and have transformed their personal lives and are
Mhm.
more and more bringing that, I think, to the workplace in saying, but why can we do X at home, but we can't do X? We can't interact with systems and processes in the workplace in the way that we can at home.
Mhm.
So I think that in itself has brought a whole lot of transformation, and then combined with multiple generations and different views of how things should be done, and with the future of work in general, I think I don't think we can be prepared for the changes coming because we have absolutely no idea what they are.
Yes. And I think being prepared for that future is building that resiliency and adaptability, being able
Yeah.
to deal with that ambiguity of not knowing, but it's okay, and to navigate, because I think that's what's required. Whereas before we could do the traditional change management and training, whereas now you need to be training on your feet. You have to intuitively navigate through it. If I look at my kids at home as an example, it's new technology, it's new speak and language every day with new methods of communicating, new games, new gaming platforms. That's an indication of how quickly I think things are going to be changing, that the
Mhm.
traditional let's introduce technology, let's make it program, let's do it's out the window.
Yeah. No, it definitely is. And it's also interesting to see just the interaction with these
Mhm.
youngsters. You mentioned the new technology and the gaming and all of
Yeah.
that. But I think for some time we were worried about their social interactions. But if you look at their social interactions, they might have, if not, and may or may not have fewer
Mhm.
deep relationships, but they have got a
Mhm.
much broader exposure, I think, to different cultures, different ways of
Mhm.
thinking. So I think it can be quite exciting to see where that goes. Obviously, you
Mhm.
need to balance
Yeah.
the tech savvy and the technical socializing or digital socializing with the in-person stuff because we are ultimately humans and social creatures and
Yeah.
there's something to be had in personal interaction. But what a wonderful world it is that's opened up this broad communication and collaboration and conversing with multiple people. And yeah, it is going to be interesting to watch how that impacts the future of work in general. I think it has already.
Yeah.
And within that, Avina, you've been in the SAP environment for
Mhm.
a long time. I know, me too.
Yeah.
How do you see
Yeah.
the persona of the typical SAP consultant changing? And what is
Yeah.
required for the SAP, let's call it the SAP functional consultant of the future?
Mhm. Yeah, so it's been an interesting, I'll call it a journey, the last 4 or 5 years, whilst we've been busy with our transformation program and looking at how do we prepare our functionals and the business to actually be ready for what needs to be embraced going forward. And when we started it, it was typical, let's go get training, let's understand the new features in S4HANA, and how can we exploit this for business benefit. But very quickly, we realized that the functionals' role completely changed. They needed to not just be technologists, but business technologists, where they can help business actually reimagine how they can use these new features. So all of a sudden, it's more important than ever for them to actually have architectural skills to create and
Yeah.
craft how the solution is going to be used. And then from a technology landscape, we very quickly realized that we're actually creating what we now term versatilists. That means you don't just need an specialist and an FI specialist. You actually need somebody that can actually utilize the various different, let me call it modular capability to make a process work. So they're now designing for processes. And with
Yeah.
that, they need the new technology from a BTP, from embedded analytics, how to build custom business objects. So they need to become versatilists. That means they need to be comfortable not knowing, but knowing where to look for
Ah.
activating certain things. But they're now becoming solution specialists with an SAP platform rather than a
Mm.
functional specialist, which I
Mm.
see very different because it needs tech skills, business skills, a little bit of agile thinking, and being able to be comfortable to explore and innovate. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that persona is really changing, and some of the individuals are taking to it like fish to water. Others are struggling, so we need to give that support to reskill and upskill. And then, and it's coming along. It is coming along.
I think you're right because it's that
Yeah.
change. That's it. It's that change in having those individuals really bridge the gap between the technology and what's required to derive the value that it can derive. So it's almost playing that translator role and having that. And I agree with you that the knowledge and skills required means that you need to understand exactly what the intricacies of the processes are in order to properly support them. And I think it's also probably the
Hmm.
time in history where we've been closest in terms of the way that the technologies integrate with the likes of BTP
Hmm.
now offering that platform where you can
Yeah.
plug and play various things in a much more structured, straightforward, but also better controlled at the same time SAP environment. So it's a really interesting world, and hopefully
Yeah.
we'll see the business value coming from that. It's a very exciting change.
Yeah.
There is, though, I do see an ever growing, even larger dependency on data. We've always had
Mm.
the mantra of garbage in, garbage out, but now
Yes.
with all these things to talk to each other and everyone wanting AI on everything. Oh, I have Meta on my WhatsApp, and those things are coming, but essentially those tools need to be able to read data that makes sense in order to get the business value out of them as well. How are you seeing the data conversation unfolding?
No, I mean, having the data ownership firstly before the technology is so key. Bringing the business along, making sure that there's ownership around data and the meaning of data is so critical. Because if we
Yeah.
don't start with that in mind, then we're going to design processes where the value and the meaning of that data is not how we're wanting to use it. So contextual data definition is so key. And your typical IT functionals are not going to have this. So you need to actually bring business along to understand not just the importance of data, because I think we've come a long way to them understanding we need accurate data, we need complete data, we need data that's reliable, but them understanding the power of design for data in the process up front, so
Mm.
that when you extract it with context, it's important. So having new roles in business around data ownership is going to be critical. But the other side of it is that I think historically we'd spend a lot of time cleaning, preparing data. It's very difficult. If you want to do a transformation program, you probably need to start 2 years in advance cleaning your data, depending on how old that system is. And that's becoming quite a big, if I can call it, a stumbling block for most organizations on where do I start? Do I have to do this before I continue? And there's two sides of this coin. The one is clean the base before you can move on, but that's going to be a never ending story. So the approach should be is water under the bridge. Your historic
Mm.
data is never going to be pretty again. You can't put lipstick on it. You need to almost park it and leave it there for, okay, its purpose to go back and look back. Going forward, you need to design from scratch. You need to
Yeah.
design with the intention of how you want to use it. And I think that's the best way. So true transformation needs to consider cleaning the slate, but also we
Yeah.
need to understand data externally that we're going to consume, because the data insights is not about our internal data only. Yes, we can go
Yeah.
do the financial reporting and things like that, but the external data and overlaying that customer insights, that's the real power that's going to create value for organizations.
Yeah. No, I fully agree. And what you're saying
Yeah.
about the leave the old data behind is that really resonates. It's completely my view as well. It's why spend time. You can repurpose that time and energy much better in just
Mhm.
designing it right for the future, and then things will
Yeah.
be much easier going forward. I
Not so
think we
easy. I think organizations, especially business, there's a fear of letting go of what it was before, and we had
yeah.
it like this. So I think there's a big change management piece to get that right. Yeah.
Yeah. No, definitely. It was always interesting in some of my previous roles with really high tech companies when you're sitting with
Mm.
the customer for the first time and you're actually showing them data just from what you've been able to collect in the public domain. That's a real eye opener saying, okay, flip, actually, maybe we shouldn't be so precious about our stuff because maybe there are better ways of doing things. But that also,
Mhm.
I think it offers a unique opportunity within AFSIG as well, because we've
Yeah.
got this community of SAP
Yeah.
customers who all have similar challenges and similar problems and can surely learn from each other and
Mhm.
expedite their own journeys through each other's experience. How do you see that playing a role, and how can we encourage more of that participation and more of those conversations, and what could the benefits be from that
Mhm.
community?
No, for sure. So definitely, Louise, I've been part of the AFSIC family for as long
Yeah.
as I've been in. I've grown. I'm actually a product of it. And my growing and learning has been from that community. And our
Yeah.
customers must not underestimate the value for it. In some of the sessions we had recently, the value of saying, how do you start your business transformation program? What are some of the pitfalls? That's worth maybe 2,500 Rand per hour consulting of 2 weeks work that
Yeah.
an external party could charge you for telling you
Yeah.
exactly how do you prepare, and what you're getting from other customers like me, like you, is the authenticity. There's no
Yeah.
sugarcoating. We'll say the good, the bad, the ugly, and you're getting value. And we're not scared to share where we failed and where we've made mistakes. So I think that value of UFSIC is that there's no marketing, there's no price tag, there's no hidden agendas. It's authentic, real experiences and learning. And it's about enriching the community's experience so that we can have stories to share where there's successes and we've learned from each other. So I think that's what it is all about, and growing our network. So if I
Yeah.
need to find a friend, where do you think I go to? It's the network that I have at UFSIC, and it's really helped me in my career and in the organization's need.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think another benefit for me is also the fact that it's across different industries. So
Hmm.
you would find someone from mining getting benefit in listening to someone from banking, which you would
Hmm.
never think of seating around the same proverbial table. So I think it's that just that expansion and exposure to other perspectives that definitely I think serves a big purpose. And then of course from there the innovation that can be cultivated in even from those sessions that can ultimately make its way back to SAP in terms of
Hmm.
influencing technology roadmaps is incredibly powerful. So it's really a very strong community driven aspect of it. Avina, something else that I
Yeah.
know you are exceptionally passionate about is the topic of skills development. And I think are almost in crisis if we look at the skills
Yeah.
gap that we currently have in the workplace. It's such a dichotomy. It's such an anomaly because we're
Mhm.
sitting with unemployment on the one side, but on the other hand, a massive skills gap. Anything that you like to share around the topic of skills development?
Broader than just SAP, I think in IT and digital skills,
Mm.
there's a shortage. And we've got new entrants into the workforce. And it was actually quite scary experience realizing of late that some of not just our matriculants and also some of our graduates that don't study IT, the limited exposure they have about working with digital technology. And we may then say, okay, but you know what? They can use a mobile, they can work social media, so they are savvy. And that is
Mm.
true. But when it comes to using it for business purposes, understanding about data, understanding about processes, understanding about how to collaborate to create solutions, that experience is totally lacking, right?
Mm.
And can it be closed? Yes, but the new generation is a completely different phenomenon in terms of their ways of working, how they collaborate, how they want to use the system, and in inspiring that. So there's such a big gap between different roles, whether it's an IT professional, whether it's a business using IT, and I will call them business technologists, they're not
Yeah.
ready for embracing it when they come out of school. So we need to
Mm.
find smarter ways to accelerate them being upskilled and to continuously create a pipeline, because gone are the days where I think one of my longest tenures at an organization was 15 years. You're not going to get that with this new generation. After 2 years, maybe 4 years, they're ready for the next thing. They want that continuous sort of growth. They want, so you need to find all of that for retention. So you're not only solving for
Yeah.
skills gap, you're also solving for retention and an ongoing cycle of losing that. But the upside of it is that it is potential. I think the last stats I've seen in South Africa, 750,000 unemployed youth that's there for looking for work. And we're
Mm.
sitting with a job crisis and a job skill. So bringing the two together is definitely a bridge that's possible, but
Yeah.
it's not without effort. So we need to be intentional with the likes of SAP, corporates like ourselves, and the academic community working together to actually close this gap and fill that. And if we get it right, we can become the next delivery hub for technology solutions and support the world. We've got
Mm.
two organizations already that I know for sure that are already using South Africa as their delivery center hub. So the potential is fantastic, but
Mm.
we've got a long way to come along.
So, something else I'm wondering about as well on that
Mhm.
topic, and I agree with you, we are so
Yeah.
well suited in this country and on this
Mhm.
continent to provide skills to the rest of the world. And our youth grow up in a unique environment where they get exposed to how business works through their parents from a young age. So I do find that they may be top heavy in terms of academic versus real life experience, but
Mhm.
I agree with you in that gap is completely bridgeable because they will pick up experientially the stuff that they've heard. But I do wonder if we
Mhm.
think of the old days of crafts and trades, if you were an apprentice and you took up an apprenticeship and it was anywhere between a 5 and a 10 year process, and if
Mhm.
you were working steel factory, that meant that you did every kind of role, you ran around, but you really built up an intricate understanding of how the material, what works, what doesn't work, how pliable and not is it, how the equipment
Mhm.
impact the end product, all of that. And I wonder if there's a way in which we
Mhm.
could try and almost simulate that kind of an apprenticeship to help cross that bridge where people really get that real solid business understanding
Mhm.
of the stuff that you can't read in books. The stuff
Yes.
that I think of examples like famous fighter pilots who
Mhm.
were not necessarily the best talented, but through their work eventually got to a point where they could almost feel the aircraft becoming an extension of their thinking and of
Mhm.
their action. And that could only happen through hours and hours of practice and really going through the nitty gritty, one by one kind of jobs. So I do wonder also if our whole education system doesn't
Mhm.
perhaps need a little bit of a change. I won't call it an overall, but bringing back some of that experiential component. And I'm
Mhm.
sure that many corporates will be very open. We already all run graduate programs
Yes.
and the like, and also some skills programs for those who are not yet qualified. So I'm sure that there must be something in that gap. Maybe we should
Mhm.
also start thinking about this differently. That
Yes.
worked for those industries.
Yes.
Maybe it can be
Yeah.
repurposed in a way for others.
And reimagining that learning experience is 100%, Louise, because it's already started, if I can call it the revolution has started. But like I said, it requires then a reskilling and retooling of the educators. So at a school level, bringing Lego robotics, maybe with our kids, it's been there now for a while,
Yeah.
but in majority of the schools, it's not there. They don't have that experience. So already that's been entering. I know that there is a plan and intention to make that almost mandatory into curriculums at all grade levels across all schools. And then
Mm.
we've been doing fantastic work with UCT, where the curriculum of your third year computer science information systems students has now including SAP modules. It's including
Awesome.
SAP Signavio. It's including understanding about data, but they need
Mm.
help. For example, Prof had reached out to many corporates to say, you know what, can you host a team of 5 with one topic
Yeah.
where they come and spend 3 months, it's on off. They come and interview you about a pain point and then they go through this whole process and that becomes their real live learning, action
Mm.
learning project. And this is year 2 now. I'm working with her and we embrace it and we take 10, 15 topics. That's 50 to 75 students of her 300. and but she's needing more help reaching out to corporates. And yes, it requires effort because my team needs to come in, make some time, but it's not every
Mm,
day for 3 months. But that's how we can contribute, and that costs nothing other than time. So I think
mm.
this is where I'm saying academia, corporates, and I can the OEMs all working together is what it's going to take. But it also requires individuals like you and me being
Mm.
passionate to want to make a difference and put
Yeah.
in this extra effort, because this is not a 9 to 5 commitment, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I agree, and I do think
Yeah.
it is the responsibility on our shoulders to help facilitate those processes. I
Mm.
think back to some of the graduates that I've had in my environment, where 2 weeks in, you see this person in the kitchen and they look completely like just down, and you say, "But what's wrong?" And they say, "But." I think I might have wasted my parents' money because of the 4 years that I studied. The 2 weeks that I spent here actually showed me the real life. I'm
Mm.
confused. So
Mhm.
programs like this certainly help bridge that gap and further enrich those studies, because they're going to go back there with a much broader perspective and a very different view and
Mm.
understanding of what goes on in the real world. So yeah, that's these programs are very exciting. I think what we can possibly do is if there's
Yeah.
a website or a link or a something
Mm.
that we got, we can always add that to the show notes in this episode, and then
Okay.
listeners can reach them through that link as well. Maybe we can
Okay.
do that.
Okay, that would be
Um,
good.
yeah, I think so. Avina, let's maybe pivot somewhat towards your current environment at
Hmm.
Engen. You've got some really exciting things going on there at the moment, and you've had some real successes in there as well. Um, are there a few of those that you can share?
Sure. Our S4 project took a pivot a couple of times, so our new go live date is imminent. But maybe from some success stories of modules that have already gone live that we really seeing benefit on is
Mhm.
SAP IBP with demand planning and being able to organize at an enterprise wide, be able to do your demand planning across all the products down to a customer level has been really
Nice.
phenomenal. And that was using standard, the implementation time was quick. So that was a good experience of seeing cloud deployment quickly. We also did an
Yeah,
early deployment with SAP EWM, and that was more an on-prem type solution, still connected to our old ECC. But we took that approach to really focus on getting the change management, the disciplines, and the behaviors right. And that
yeah,
started off being quite a rocky road. There were lots of lessons, some significant business disruption, but it quickly, when we took everybody together, the successes came through with the users are using it. You're able to see your warehouse dashboards. You're able to see what's coming in from a that needs to be picked and packed. You can be able to
yeah,
see your stock availability. And our previous warehouse management solution was not a non-SAP solution. So I think a lot of change management there, but definitely good learnings and lessons as we move forward to the bigger go live. The
mm,
other success, which I think it was really significant for us as an organization, was also moving away and using, we called it the enhancement framework. So going away from the Z code and customizing and using, knowing that we still have very unique business scenarios, but using the enhancement framework that is developed to allow you to differentiate and to customize rather than writing Z code. So there's now this whole toolkit. And
yeah,
this, we brought our entire development team and our functionals around how do you enhance in an acceptable manner. So
yeah.
it sometimes makes me smile. And it's in our young days, people want to soup up their car, double exhaust it to give it high performance. And then you'd lose your insurance. And if it breaks, that's it. Now you've
Yeah.
got an insured framework to soup up your car and to really get
Nice.
it high performing. So I think
Insurance.
that excitement is good.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Such a nice one. analogy. No, thanks for that, Aveena.
Yeah.
That really is an exciting, changing world. It's a
Mhm.
nice example, I think, of lessons learned over years in
Yeah.
this environment, coming together and building things and
Mhm.
continually renewing and making things better. So, yeah, that's very exciting. So, that also leads me to the next question, which is there's a lot of discussion around the CIO 2.0. We've spoken about what are
Mhm.
some of the changes in the other skills, but what is required for the CIOs of the future?
Yeah. So quite interesting. I always say that I'm an accidental CIO because in, I think, 2006, I made a turn and I decided, you know what, I'm going to go into business and did various business roles, not only in the oil and gas industry, in the beverage industry, in the energy sector broader. And I think that gives me an appreciation for what your C-suite want from their, let's call it, partner in exploration, who's that CIO, because the CIO needs to not just think about, okay, storage space and
Yeah.
service and that pacing speed. It's about application and business value of IT, right? And what that means is that the CIO needs to be able to really truly understand what's top of mind of the chief marketing officer, your chief operating officer, to be able to say, you know what, how am I providing solutions to problems and creating new opportunities? So the CIO of the future is a combination of somebody focusing on digital, data privacy, cybersecurity. It's all of these things in one. And yes, you've got your expert team leads in there. But if you don't have an appreciation to actually sell to the organization why all of these different components are required to bring that business value of IT, so you find yourself
Mm,
becoming a catalyst for change. You find yourself becoming an influencer, and it's almost a tech evangelist almost, but it's
mm,
not just about the tech and selling that value. So it's that CIO 2.0 needs to be that catalyst for change, and we need to embrace it, because it's no use cowering in the back end just providing stable systems, providing and
yeah.
running projects. Actually need to be bold enough and being in the front line to actually demonstrate and challenge old mindsets to say, you know what, this is where we need to. So for me, I think the CIO 2.0 needs a very different skill set as well. And if the individual is not fit for that, this is where you then find organizations saying, okay, CIO, you focus on keeping stable foundations because that's required. And sometimes we don't have time to focus on the digital and data because keeping stable operations is time consuming. Cybersecurity takes up a lot of time as well. So sometimes
Mm,
then the role then evolves to a chief digital, chief data innovation analytics type officer, and then those
mm,
two work partners together. And that, but the most powerful one is where it's both combined. But there are
yeah.
organizations that are two separate roles, but they need to work together. It's like twins. And I
Mm,
think
mm,
that's what the CIO needs to, it's partnership and collaboration for the skill sets that complement each other so that they can move
mm.
the organization forward with exponential growth. And I think that's what I'm seeing, including myself, I need to transform into.
That's a very, I think, honest and sobering perspective because you're now also seeing the chief or what chief AI officers starting to
Yes,
emerge. So I get you. I guess the
yeah.
CIO role really is the connector of the dots. It's like the connective
Mhm.
tissue between all these parties, including business, and it's the
Yeah,
one role that's stayed consistent and stable throughout. You've
yeah,
had the CTOs and, like you say,
yeah,
the chief digital and now the AIs and everything. But the one consistent part has really been the CIO
yeah.
in that role. It's also an interesting topic always when we start talking about the role of women in IT and women in IT
Mm-hmm.
leadership. I do think that sometimes people get hung up on things like statistics without understanding the context. There are, I think, fewer women possibly who choose these careers as well, which also need to be considered. Women are or often mothers who take a sidestep for a little bit and focus a little bit less on their career for a few years and then re-enter the workforce. So there's a lot of context around it. But be that as it may, any thoughts around women in tech and women in tech leadership, and perhaps some guidance of females who are interested in this field and who do see a career for themselves in this field, and how they can prepare and how they can bring the best version of themselves?
No, for sure. So, yeah, it's an interesting one, and what makes it more interesting is having to have lived it. And I think a couple of things. So, like we said, I think historically, yes, there was a deterrent about if you go into IT, you have to work month ends, you have to work late nights, you're not going to see your family, so you're not going to get that work-life balance. And somehow that stigma still sticks. So
Mm,
individuals are reluctant to go into that, knowing that at some point it's going to cause a bit of a wobbly. Also, you'd
mm,
find some of the young females, also from a confidence perspective, because they see this as a very male dominated, and how are they going to fit in there? So there's a lot of mentoring, coaching that needs to be done to change mindsets to say it is possible. And in order to do that, the youngsters that are entering into the field and that are succeeding need to share their stories, because I think saying it from my side is maybe not always relatable. It shows what is
yeah,
possible, but it's a different time, it's a different lifestyle than what it is today. So I think hearing from other youngsters is important. I still do my mentorship and coaching, but I usually, when I'm interacting with youngsters, I bring my team to the party. And I think that's
right.
what is required, is that individual women like myself in senior positions needs to lend our shoulders to lift up other women in our teams, to actually make
Mm,
them in the spotlight, to allow them to share their stories, because they can be very inspirational of their stories, because they're more relatable as well. The other thing is that besides as women supporting other women, I think it's also important to remove some of those biases that are in there. That in order to succeed, I must lose my femininity. I must not be vulnerable. And sorry, hogwash to that,
yeah.
because I think you need to actually show up at work, because we bring a diversity to the team dynamic in terms of the way of solving problem, but most importantly, leading with empathy to our teams, and that
Mm,
nurturing ability that we've got, which is naturally inclined to us, actually helps create teams that are able to work together, collaborate, but also allow for vulnerability. And that's so important in this day and age, Louise, with the stress levels that are in our organizations, that there's psychological safety built so that we create high performing teams and
mm,
untapping their talents, but also working in an environment that's safe, because it's all of those elements that's required to actually really create a high performing team. And a lot of that's got to do with what women bring to the table in terms of that empathy and understanding. So, a lot said. How do we help the younger generation come in is being that supporting stone, being able to be there to listen to them, help them to remove those fears rather than judging, but also sharing that it is possible. I think just showing that it's possible is inspiration enough.
yeah.
But yeah, we still got a long ways to go. I recently was at an international conference, and when I went there, I almost felt, and it was strange, being as confident as I am, having the experience, I almost felt like imposter syndrome, because you could count the number of females that were in that
Yeah.
conference. And I had to very quickly pull myself up and say, you know what? I have value to create and contribute to being there, and then raise. But that's my personality. Somebody
Yeah.
else would have actually shied away. So the world as large needs to change, because we've not yet bridged the women diversity in the technology space to the extent that it needs to. We've made progress, but it's far from crossing over.
But I agree. I
Mhm.
like what you said,
Mhm.
Avina, and I agree with you in that
Yeah.
there are biases, and what I'm hearing is very similar to my thinking in that those biases come from internal. It's no
Mhm.
longer there's no blockage.
Mhm.
There's absolutely no reason for any gender, he, she, they, or whatever configuration
Yeah.
to enter. It's
Mhm.
up to the individual. I do also agree that it's about being authentic,
Yeah.
whatever that looks like. You need to be true to yourself, and therefore, we need your authentic self in the
Mhm.
workplace. And that talks to the diversity element as well. And diversity for me is diversity of thinking. Again,
Mhm.
regardless of
Mhm.
what that thinking materializes as,
Yeah.
but that
Yeah.
diversity of thinking, so that you've got that rounded combination of perspectives on any
Yeah.
given topic. Personally, I
And
really
yeah.
enjoy
Yeah.
IT events, especially the more senior ones, because yes, they
Yeah.
are male dominant,
Mm.
not because women aren't allowed or can't get in. It's not
Yeah.
that. It's all that we've spoken about. But what I do really like about it is there's never a queue at the ladies. They're the most
Yeah.
awesome events.
Yes. And I think there's a lot more of the senior males in leadership. They understanding their role to support and create pathways to collaborate. And I'm definitely seeing that. Most of my mentors over the last 25 years have been gentlemen at senior VP customer service, VP finance, at those levels. And without them, I would not have grown where I am as well. So they have a role as men in the industry to also encourage and support the females in their teams. But as you said, diversity is also in the thinking. In my last graduate intake, I tried something really weird, because we did an intake not at the beginning of the year, but in September. And now it's almost going to be 2.5 years there with me, and took engineers, mechanical
Yeah.
and electrical, took a Bachelor of Arts student. So I went and I said, because the reality is that whatever you learned at university is actually just a test to say that you've got the persistence to see something through. You're never going to use
Yeah.
anything that you learn, was the theory. And so brought them in. I've got two engineers in cybersecurity. I've got a BA student that's working in data engineering and SAP doing testing. And it's phenomenal the way they approach, and another engineer that's in business process and learning Lean Six Sigma from a process and improvement perspective. And that's what the different thinking, the different personalities that come in, rather than how
Yeah.
we historically said you must be computer science, information systems. It needs to
Mm.
be about capabilities and talents, because it's
Yeah.
what makes you passionate. So I think that diversity of thinking is also about how we must recruit, how we must develop
Mm.
skill, and yeah, and then we'll give opportunities to those that historically or traditionally weren't in the STEM field, because
Yeah.
that's where the bias also starts from a school level and still is, unfortunately. Yeah, so we've got a long ways to come, but we've made
Yeah.
great progress. We've made great
Yeah.
progress.
And I think we're standing now at a point in time where there's massive change happening, and a lot of what people thought they knew now is becoming clear that maybe we didn't know as much as we thought we knew. I think just the openness to embrace new ways of working and new ways of
Mhm,
approaching things, and like you said, the future is it's a
mhm.
very exciting time. I think with its real opportunity.
And I think with
Um,
COVID introducing hybrid working, I think that brings a whole different element of how the new workforce works, collaborates with each other, and how you can strive to get a balance. I'm hoping with the future of work, it's not also about just skills, it's about how we work, where we work, which is also going
Yeah.
to create a great dynamic, I think, to more entrance into the field of technology. Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely. It definitely opens up the playing field to a large degree.
Yeah.
Awesome. Aveena, thank you so much for your time. It's been fantastic catching up on a multitude of topics. It's a conversation with you is always one that I walk away from with more stuff to think about. So
No,
thanks for that.
likewise. Thanks, Louise. And luckily, when we both start chatting, it's usually time just goes by very quickly. So this was another time like that when there's individuals that have a shared passion and wanting to make a difference out there. I think there's a lot to be spoken and done about. And that's why I love being part of AFSIC. It's collaborating with the likes of yourself and Amanda and all the wonderful women and gentlemen that are in the groups. And I learn every day through all of you. So thank you as well.
Likewise. All right, we'll wrap it up then for today. Thanks again, Aveena.
Thanks, Louise.
Bye.
Bye.